let us know when you're ready. Okay, great. Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the May 1st Radnor Township School District Finance Committee meeting. I'd like to start off with introductions or administrative remarks if we have anything from Michelle.
I do not have anything that I'm going to address here, but I will answer some questions when we have our discussion about budget.
Thank you so much. Okay, with that, I'd like to bring forth the first public comment. Do we have any? Great. Welcome, Mrs. Sherry. I'm assuming you've already signed in on the side.
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You need to turn your mic.
There you go. Just a comment from the minutes. Will someone from the administration of the school board give an explanation as to why the district's athletic opportunities disclosure reports from 16-17 and 15-16 indicate that the football booster club contributed $0 towards purchases for football? Ask that at least 3 times. Is the board going to provide an update on the expensive and highly partisan investigation of a school board member? Why is this painful process taking so long? When will it conclude, and how much is it costing taxpayers? Why is the contract being extended with Fox Rothschild LLC? Number 3, ask that repeatedly too. What factors does the district use when it shows increases in revenues on the 3-year projected budget? So on this sheet that you've all received, it shows each year that the revenues will be increasing, and I just wondered what was used to determine those increases. Number 4, why does the district continue to pay the elected tax collector compensation to not collect taxes? Why does it use the 2005 resolution in part to justify this ridiculous practice? If Ms. Gartland is working for the district in some way, why don't you just pay her for what she's doing and not for what she's not doing? Number 5, I'd like to have an explanation of the wildly different funding of sports like crew and ice hockey as compared to other sports like football, lacrosse, and baseball. Even golf gets more funds. So we have students that are participating in sports, some of them very costly, and we actually pay, I think we significantly underfund those particular athletes. So I'd like to have a much better explanation as to why that is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there any other public comment? Welcome, Mrs. Spurtle.
Cindy Spurtle, Wayne. The absence report, substitute absence report. I found it on the website, thank you. Full day, half day absences were way up in February. I know this is the finance committee, but has there been a study as to why in February the absentee jumped way out of line? And it seemed to drop in January and slightly dropped in March. So since we haven't had any reports, and I did find the charts, an explanation would be nice to have. And then I'm curious, every year you vote, the board votes on the appointment of directors for the DCIU. And my question, I don't, at least the last 5-6 years I've been attending the school district board meetings. My question is, what can you, the school board, do to recruit someone to run so Radnor Township will be represented on this board? I'm not saying Radnor Township. I know that as a director, do we have a director?
A couple perhaps.
Patty Booker serves on it.
Are you talking about the DCIU? Or are you talking about
the DCI Intermediate Unit Board of Directors? Or
so we do have a representative.
Patty board representative as a director?
Yeah. Yes,
or
we do.
Representative.
Board director.
Okay.
Patty Booker's on there. She also chairs for them their facilities.
I know she reports on it. So
board directors serve on the
Your
board.
mic's not on.
School board directors serve on their board.
Correct.
As That's what that is for.
So what happens with the election is, so you understand, not every district is up for re-election at the same time.
But
So-
every district is represented on the board.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep, great. Okay, do we have any other public comment? Alrighty, seeing none, I'm gonna ask Sarah, Mike, were you okay with the minutes from last month?
Fantastic.
So good.
Well written.
Fine.
Great, super. So Michelle, just to circle back around for a couple of these questions, I'll leave it to you about this question about the football boosters.
I can address that now if you.
Well, why don't we do it as part of budget,
Okay.
along with the,
Alright, she's leaving. Do you wanna hear the
Oh,
answer,
you're
Judy?
leaving? oh, I'm sorry. Why don't you go ahead and answer with that, Michelle, since you have it?
So Title IX started back, I don't remember exactly what year, but part of Title IX, one of the changes was we had to start reporting boosters contribution support for the various teams. We do that by sending a letter out to the various booster groups, asking them to provide financial information. We send that multiple times. And what PDE has said is that you could ask them to provide the information, you cannot make them supply it. So with football filled out their financial information in 14-15. In 15-16 and 16-17, they did not provide the information. And since we're doing a booster policy, we think this is something that we can incorporate into the AR, and we're going to be looking at making some changes to that. So we do make numerous attempts. We're required to make at least 3. We make 5, maybe 6 attempts, and sometimes we just can't get the information.
Okay, great. So I suppose if the public has questions, they could contact the boosters. Okay, great. Just want to be clear about the investigation, because that continues to be, an item that is, we've made a decision as a board to not discuss at this time. That decision may change at a later point, but at this time, just want to manage everyone's expectations that we will not be addressing that, other than to say the investigation continues, and that's the reason that we are doing the authorization. We're not going to discuss it. We decided as a board we would not discuss it while the investigation was underway. We are holding to that decision as a board. Great. Okay.
It's on the agenda for an extension because they reached out to us, and it was based on the schedule of people they're trying to meet with. It's not that the investigation is actually taking longer or more time. It's just that the schedule to meet with people and the challenges faced with that is why they asked for to continue, because some people it's taken several weeks to meet with them.
Okay, great. So with that, let's move into the action items. Michelle, do you want to start with is it 4.1?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
So you'll see on the agenda action items, there's the approval of contracts, as Mr. Batchelor just explained. There's some laptops and spring musical costumes to be disposed of, donated or sold. And then there is the approval of the standard bids that we do at this time for supply and equipment, and the appointment of the treasurer, which is Penny Tansey. That is something that we do on an annual basis. Another item, which is 4.2, which is the approval of the Delaware County Community College 2018-19 budget. That's another standard item that we do this time every year. Same with the election of the Delaware County Intermediate Board of Directors. That's a standard item that we do every year. And as I explained earlier, not every township or every school district that is in the IU, the representatives are not up for re-election all at the same time.
So Mrs. Booker will continue.
Mrs. Booker will continue, correct. School district tax collection, this is the resolution to approve the tax collector, who is paid 25 cents per bill for the bills that we issue. She waives her right to collect those taxes. She is elected. If she didn't waive that right, she would be able to collect her taxes for us. We prefer to use a lockbox, which used to use a lockbox. This is something that's very standard in terms of what school districts do when their tax collector waives, because she's also waiving her right to perform tax certifications as well, which she would have the ability to do if she collected our taxes.
Michelle, I'm sorry, can you just clarify? I don't want to delay the meeting because I know you're late, but I had the same questions as the public. So she, as the elected tax collector in Radnor Township, is entitled to collect all taxes for all local groups, for all local governmental authorities. So she's entitled and has been empowered by the public to collect our taxes, is what you're saying. And we would prefer that it not be some individual who collects it, who's elected. We would prefer that we do it through a lockbox and we maintain it ourselves. And for that privilege, we pay her because if she were collecting them, is she entitled to a portion of the proceeds of the collections?
So if she were collecting them, she'd be required to deposit those funds in a timely basis into our account or some sort of our account. But she would be processing all of our interim bills. She would be processing all of our current real estate taxes. She'd be reporting the information back to us, and she'd be maintaining our records. And so she'd be entitled to compensation, not necessarily on the collection of those taxes or a percentage of that, but she would be entitled to compensation for tax certifications that she would do on any of our parcels.
So essentially, we'd have to have her almost as a salaried employee.
Well, she would charge whatever she wanted. We currently charge $30 to do a tax certification, and I could look in the budget book and tell you how much it is, but we generate quite a bit of income from that, $30,000+ every year to do tax certifications. We think that money's better suited here as opposed to going directly to her, and in return we pay her a small amount, 25 cents a bill.
Okay. And you said this is fairly standard, lots of districts in Pennsylvania do this?
Lots of districts do it if they collect through a lockbox on their own.
Okay, it's something we've been doing for years?
Oh, yes, and the 25 cents a bill has been standard, but let me ask you a question about that. So she's elected by the state, it's township, because it's a position that is created by the Commonwealth. Are we required to pay her in exchange for saying to her, no, thank you, we would prefer you not collect our bills, or is that the consideration we give her?
I don't know the specific answer to that, but I can find that out for you.
So I think this does create a confusion. It does seem odd that we would pay someone to not do work for us, but I think at the end of the day, the $2,000 we pay the treasurer every year to not do this work is more than offset by the $30,000 or so that we receive in tax certifications. If she were doing this work for us, it would cost us the tax certification money.
It would cost us the tax certification.
Right, we would forego that money.
Right. And
okay.
I know in the past, when John Osborne was the tax collector, he didn't have the means in order to be able to collect our taxes, so he didn't want to collect them anyway.
Okay.
But if they don't want to do it, why are we paying them not
I'll
to do it?
find
Like,
out.
that's the part that bothers me.
Well, I actually think that's great. I actually think that's required by law, but I want Michelle to double check that.
Because I feel like there must be a reason people wouldn't just be doing that.
Let's look more
Yeah.
into it, come back to the board.
Well, you know what, that'll be a great question to answer at the board meeting, so thank you. And then just quickly, so everyone has a good understanding, the DCIU, the DCC budget, is that gonna be a roll call vote, correct? The DCCC budget?
Yes. Yeah.
Roll call. DCIU elections will be roll call, correct? No, that's not roll call. Okay, great. So then you're ready to move into, is everybody good with those? We'll just see them on our agenda. And so you want to move right into the budget update?
I would like to move right into the budget update.
Super.
So what was distributed to all of you in your packet is a copy of the 3-year projected budget. That's the one item we didn't have a chance to discuss yet. And you can see based on this that we are showing that in 17-18, our projected revenues and our projected expenses, and I'm still showing that there's going to be a shortfall of $287,981. When we passed the budget for 17-18, we anticipated using $490,110. So I'm saying that we won't need to use all of that. So we'll use roughly $202,000 less than we anticipated. The projected revenues going out, 18-19 is what has been approved by the board for the proposed final. 19-20, 20-21, and 21-22 are estimates of where we think we will be. You can see that there will be a shortfall in all of those years. So there was a question that Mrs. Sherry asked about how you determine increases in revenue. The same way we do increases on expenses. We look at a 7-year history, and we take into consideration what the increases have been from one year to the next, and we take those into account.
You okay?
Yeah, something always gets me in this room.
Could be that it's freezing today.
I'm the only person who's not cold.
I'm not cold.
It's cold.
No, I'm not
It's
cold.
you.
Lydia was cold.
Just me. She's a cold-blooded litigator.
All right.
I have a warm heart.
So-
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, just so you make your, also, I mean, I understand that there are people who might look at this and go, well, how did you make your, what assumption is here, there, and everywhere, but in fact, your 3-year projected budget is just a series of assumptions, some of which are best left in your astute mind for a variety of reasons, but, they're conservative.
Correct, and some will come true and some won't.
Correct, that's budget assumptions.
Can you
Okay.
tell us which ones will not?
That would be helpful.
We'll have the crystal ball.
That would be really helpful. So you just wanted us to be aware of this. Michelle knows I'm a big fan of the one-page budget summary for kind of seeing the big picture, whether it's projected or it's even this year's budget summary.
Can I just go back and just
Sure.
kind of get a little clarification, because I had the same question as Sherry did about the basis for the increases. So I get that you just look back at the history, so you're kind of extrapolating what might be the increase, the permissible increase in taxes under Act 1. You're assuming property values may go up, but you haven't necessarily specifically considered the new assessments that Delaware County is going to do of everybody's property.
I do.
You considered that. Have you also considered potential increases to our tax revenue based on the development of the Penn property? The new
I have
property?
not.
Okay. Okay, so I was just kind of wondering what some of the factors were, and it's just.
So if we know a specific revenue, for example, and can calculate it, we calculate that out. If we don't know, we just make assumptions, and
Okay.
we do take a look at how much our assessment has grown from one year to the next.
Mhm.
We had a year where it decreased, so that can kind of throw a monkey wrench
Sure.
in your projection. But we take a look at every single line item on the revenue side to determine where we think that should be. There's a whole lot of spreadsheets behind the scene that
I'm sure.
generate this one-page summary report. And a lot of time is spent updating that information to make sure the proper amounts are coming forward.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
So did you just want us to see this so
I
we
just
have a
wanted-
sense of the 3-year projection?
I wanted you to see that so you had a sense of the 3-year projection.
Okay.
And I know a lot of times people look at this and they say, oh, it's doom and gloom, we're gonna have this great big huge deficit when we get out to that final year. It's really not. It's not doom and gloom. I think that the deficit amounts are reasonable. It doesn't even take into account using any fund balance or any other means or exceptions to balance the budget. So those were some things that aren't taken into consideration but are options for the board to consider before a final budget would be approved.
Mike, do you have any questions? Because I have one more, but I don't know if you have any.
It does not include capital either, right, which is, I mean, for me, it's fine.
It does not include
Yeah,
capital.
Which is fine, because in my opinion, it's almost a separate budget, because it comes out of the dedicated fund.
So the only question I have is this 1920 use of retirement escrow is a very odd amount. Are the 3 years cumulatively running the 490, the 883, 117? Is that what we have left in that PSERS budget, and that's why you've thrown it out that way?
This is what was in the spend down plan. So when we look at the spend down plan for the retirement escrow, we took into account what the estimated increase was going to be for PSERS and based that amount on what the increase was over and above what our Act 1 increase would support.
Okay.
And so that's for that 83,000. When we get done in that year, which is 1920,
Right.
there will still be funds left in that retirement escrow
Well,
account.
that was going to be my question to you, because when I came on the board 4.5 years ago, there was a 5-year spend out plan, and you stated there's still going to be money there. I'm fine with stretching a 5-year spend out to 10. I always, we seem to not be able to quite use up what we anticipate to use in fund balance. It's not yet happened. It could happen. I understand assumptions go the way they could, but at some point we may want to have a conversation about how much money is left in that Peters account? I mean, something more than 800,000, I just don't remember exactly how much.
There's either, it's in the book. And
Yeah, I don't remember the number,
Yeah,
but
I
it's a
don't either,
lot.
but It's quite a bit,
No, it's not that much, it's not, it's 1.5, 2.
I'll take a look at it in
Okay,
a second.
anyway, at some point, we may have to have a conversation of a board of, hey, remember that money we were gonna spend down in 5 years and now it's been closer to 10 and we still haven't spent it all?
But, I mean,
They made
I
the
like-
decision
yeah,
7
right,
years
right,
ago to
right,
have a
right.
5-year spend down. I don't wanna take a lot
Yeah,
of
we don't
time,
do
I'm just
that. I mean,
saying.
that's a future
At
coverage
some
we're
point
gonna
down the
have.
road, we may wanna discuss, are we still comfortable spending it down in that fashion?
Yeah.
Or something else. 83 that was the number we allocated a few years ago when we thought that would be the end of the fund.
There'll be $2.1 million left.
Oh, you are right.
Wow. In that
Go buy
fund.
yourself a candy.
That's it, go out on a high note. Alrighty, so, what else would you like to tell us about the budget then tonight?
Just that there's still things that we talked about at the board meeting that we're working on. We're still working on staffing and capital and quite a few other things. We'll be bringing back to the finance committee a recommendation for how to balance the budget before it is approved at the May meeting.
This is the May meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry, at the we will get something to you, so we're all clear on.
Prior
how
to
we're
the
gonna-
board meeting.
Prior to the board meeting.
Okay.
But I did want to address a question that was asked at the board meeting. It was also asked at the finance committee meeting regarding
Subs.
regarding substitutes. And this is the budget that was being questioned. The major function object proposed, you can see here in the 100-300 line, the 2015-16 actual expenses were the 146, and then in 16-17 it went to 878, and then 17-18 it went to budgeted expenditures of just over $1 million. And then what we've spent so far to date, the projection, and then the budget requests for 2018-19. I wanted to point this slide out because this is not a true comparison. In 15-16, the district was paying for substitutes. They would have been paid in the 100 line item under wages and salaries, and they would have been paid all throughout the various functions, or the major functions. So regular ed, special ed, nursing services, any area where we paid for a sub. If we paid for a psychology sub, it would have been in the psychology area. So in order to make that a comparison that is comparable, you have to take that into consideration. So on this slide here, what I'm showing in 15-16, the 1100-300, and that's all the way across. Those are the amounts that were either actual or budgeted. Then I'm taking into account teacher substitute wages and benefits to come up with the total. The 802,501 is comparable to 16-17, the 878,786. Keep in mind, in 16-17, that was the first year that we went to source for teachers. And this number here would have had a significant increase for PSER's contributions if we would have continued to pay for those subs in the 100 area in 16-17. That's what accounts for the large amount here, most of this 76,285. What year did we increase these numbers?
16, 17.
And then part of the way in 16-17, we increased the dollar amount that we paid to substitutes on a daily basis. In 17-18, I've done the same thing. You can see the difference here is $208,000 when I compare the $1,087,000 to the 878. However, you have to take into account that in this year, we started to use source for teachers to pay for paraprofessionals. And when we take those dollar amounts off, we're actually less than what we had been in the previous year. 18-19, we're anticipating that we'll continue to pay paraprofessionals and we'll continue to pay substitutes. So that is an actual comparison. That is a true comparison. So we're down 13,562. Without going through this exercise, you could make the assumption that there was a significant increase in that area when there hasn't been.
Well, I think that, first of all, thank you very much for this, and that was a really comprehensive answer to a question from the public. That was, you know, charts and sheets and colors and everything, so thank you. I do want to circle back around to another question that I didn't address at public comment, and it aligned with this, and so before I forget, I know that there's been a lot of discussion in the last year or two about absentees, and I know that we took a lot of time in the finance committee to think about how we could address it, and what steps the finance committee could recommend and could get behind that would assist the administration in addressing what appeared to be, and what in some cases is a absentee problem, but really a shortage of substitute teachers, which was, I think, really what caught our eye about this. I'm not sure that we would have been spending quite so much time on substitute teacher rates had it not all of a sudden become very difficult to fill substitute teacher spots. And that's why this actually became a conversation. And somewhere in this, it seems like it became a conversation about our absenteeism. And this is the thing I would like to say publicly to the public. And Mrs. Bertle, I mean, not to address you publicly, but just I want you to hear. The administration is probably in many instances aware of specific reasons that there are absences in certain months. Some of those reasons are tied to specific people, personnel reasons. Could be illness, could be whatever, all sorts of reasons that are of a confidential nature and personnel. So we're not going to answer those questions, not because we don't care that you're asking, and not because we think you don't care, but because some of them are directly related to specific employees, and it just wouldn't be appropriate. And I do just want to remind people, this came up because we were all of a sudden having trouble getting substitutes statewide, but in Radnor, not because our absenteeism problem was so horrific. And then it turned out, in moving over to Source for Teachers, the way that it was allocated on some paperwork, tabulated, not even allocated, tabulated, it did make it appear for a period of time that we did have a very high absenteeism rate. And Todd and Michelle have now worked closely and clarified that. And I think for the most part, beyond some specific personnel reasons that we are not going to discuss, we don't have a glaring absenteeism problem, and we are doing a better job at a fill problem, a substitute problem. So that's the reason we're not going to discuss it at this level anymore in this committee, because really we had a situation, we addressed the situation, now we're going to move on to another situation. I mean, we're not going to keep discussing the math in curriculum anymore, whether or not we should have a new math program, because we addressed that problem. So it's just that time in the process where we had it, we dealt with it, we're moving on. It's not that we don't care. I'll say this personally, you guys are managing it, I'm not.
I think that's a good summary, and the district continues to manage it. And from a personnel matter, we continue to manage all matters dealing with personnel and attendance. One of the good things that did come out of the discussions with the board at this level was the increase in working with our substitute teacher service, with having the availability of substitutes at each building. Right. So we made a decision as a district, and that has, one of the pieces that has helped with the fill rate. We continue to monitor that, and continue to monitor, do we need that at that level, or can that be reduced? And that's one of the things we continue to discuss. I just had a discussion last week with principals about that, and that the discussions here did make a difference with that fill rate and what we decided to do, so thank you for that.
Great.
So I think just to kind of address what I'm guessing will be a corollary question from the public, and I think it's worth asking. Just can you confirm our fill rates are much better now that we have Source for Teachers? And do you have a sense of what they are?
I can confirm that the fill rates are better than when I first came on board and we were doing it in-house. And I believe I can confirm, but I'll look at Michelle, I believe we're saving money by sourcing it out based on what she's presented. And that was the thought process I had when we were looking at this a couple of years ago, that with PSERS and the fill rates, we may be better off outsourcing overall to help the district. Our fill rates are, I just got the information for April that I have not completed yet, but our fill rates are 90 plus for some months.
Okay. And that's fairly standard in the area, so we're not really
We-
below our comparable school districts.
In my last HR directors meeting, I had people from other districts coming up to me asking about source for teachers because they want to go there because they've seen our fill rates compared to theirs. I'm hoping some of them don't come, that it dilutes our pool.
Give them the wrong number.
But
It's also the building substitutes, that made a big difference.
I think it was
for us.
our commitment. See, I think that's the piece other districts are, there's the commitment
To
we
building
made
substitutes.
to building substitutes to try to make sure that we could improve that fill rate. I think that we saw a difference, because we only did that starting last spring.
correct. And one of the reasons we ended up going with source for teachers is they were on the cheaper side, but there was nobody else in Delaware County that had them as a substitute provider, so we weren't going into a diluted pool already. It did take a little time to get our pool up there, but I think we're better off with where we are now compared to where we were.
The other conversation was, and it keeps getting pushed into the future, I don't even know the status of it at this time, but, you know, one of the looming concerns was gonna be the impact of the Cadillac tax on healthcare by keeping, some of these people in-house. So that had been I think that conversation has become kind of a non-starter, but never did come to fruition, but that was another piece of the puzzle for us at the time. Anyway, all right, so that's
really, I really appreciate you
Yeah.
having that information at your fingertips, because I've heard anecdotally, and anecdotally always to me is totally unverified, so could totally be false, that we still had problems, or that, you know, part of the problem was Radnor doesn't pay as much as other districts, but I mean, it sounds like we have a good fill rate, so I feel much better about that.
And it's always so hard with issues like this, the narrative gets out there, and then you know, also you talk to people, and you have that one day where there is a challenge filling, and everybody reverts back to, oh, we're having troubles. Well, wait a minute, let's actually look at the numbers. Where are our fill rates and what are our percentages? And the changes we made last year have helped this year.
great.
Makes a difference.
And again, the public can go on to some of the HR, so if you go on the website, it's Department's Human Resources, and when you click on that on the bottom left, you'll see our fill rates, and you'll be able to see as long as we've had source for teachers and what our fill rates are.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
so, budget. What would you like to tell us?
Just know that we're still working on it. The things that we talked about last week at the board meeting in
Great.
April, we're still working on, and we'll continue to work on those and bring options before the board meeting on how to pass a budget that's balanced and how to make that happen.
Do you guys have any specific questions? I mean, I think the other thing, and I'll wrap it up by saying, you know, it feels like we're getting down to the wire only because we happen to be a district that prefers to pass our budget in May, to then give the administration, you know, 3 months to really be able to implement it, rather than, we could be at a much more casual pace right now if we were intending for a June passage of our budget, but we prefer May, it's been our custom, and so that's the reason that it feels, you know, you all still have to do work to do it, but that's the reason sometimes it feels a little different. Okay, great, well with that, I'm gonna,
Can I ask one last question?
Sure.
Just because I think.
Yeah.
I think I may have heard the answer, but I just want to be clear. On this, the summary sheet that was in our packets, line 1400, other instructional programming, elementary and secondary, it disappears after 1819. Is that the paraprofessionals, or what is that that's disappearing in the future?
That's actually homebound instruction.
Homebound, so we just don't know how to project
So I
for it.
just don't have any way to project it. It fluctuates greatly. We account for that in the instructional area of 1100, and then if it has to get moved down, it gets moved down to homebound instruction.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any new business? Great, do we have a second public comment? Mr. Webster, welcome.
Well, thank you. I have a few comments on the 3-year projected budget. Sorry, got my glasses.
Just wing it.
One thing, and hopefully you'll indulge me with a couple answers, they're not too challenging, but Sarah had said something about, does this account for the reassessment that's coming? If there's a reassessment, am I wrong in assuming that if, say, valuations go up by 10%, we would reduce our millage rate by 9% to compensate for that, right?
The first year of, if it's a countywide reassessment, the first year it has to be revenue neutral. So you have to do a formula to make sure that that's what occurs.
Thank you. It would be, in my opinion, helpful to have a few enhancements to this schedule. It is helpful having all the numbers on one page. I think it would be helpful if there were a second page, could be on the back, that just had some of the major assumptions, a little bit of narrative about what you're assuming. I went through and calculated what the real estate tax increases were from year to year, and it was 3.8% in 18-19, which I believe is approximately what the budget is that we're working on now, and then it's 1.9%, 2.2, and 2.5%, which are probably tied with the Act 1 allowable increases, I'm guessing. There's also built into there typically about a 0.6% assessment increase. So the actual amounts that the taxpayers would have to pay, given the assessment increasing, would be a little bit less than those amounts. But I think it'd be helpful to include that in here. You have the millage changes at the bottom, but for most people, myself included, I'm guessing that seeing 0.0716 mils of change is completely meaningless to them.
That's not what that, Dan, that's not what that is. What that 0.716 represents is the millage impact of the shortfall, not the full tax increase.
Same point. My point's the same.
Yeah,
I went
right.
and calculated, well, if we had that shortfall, we had to make it up with taxes.
But we can't.
It would increase 3.8% to 4.4%.
Right, got it.
So rather than showing a millage increase, it might be helpful for a normal person to see that it's a 0.6% additional tax that would be necessary to cover that shortfall. I think Mike asked if this doesn't include any capital spending, and capital spending is significant, as we just saw in the 5-year capital plan. Maybe I'm misinterpreting, or I just forget what fund transfers out are, but I thought that had something to do with funding our curriculum and our technology and our capital, but I could be wrong there.
So on this report, it does have a small amount of capital in it, but it's not based on the capital plan, and perhaps it should. It's certainly open to suggestions about how to improve the reporting.
If we're looking at what the budget outlook is, it would seem appropriate to factor in whatever our capital plan is over that period of time, or else you have a big hole that you're missing, potentially a big hole, and there's some, I think it's $8.5 million being spent over the next 5 years, so it is a significant amount. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other public comment? Alrighty, seeing none, I am adjourned. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.